Well, welcome to 700 Club Canada. I hope its sun is shining wherever you are today, because I'm happy spring is, I think it's sprung officially.
Yeah, and that helps because we're talking this week about mental health.
Yeah.
And actually, the Canadian Mental Health Association describes mental health as a concept similar to physical health. It refers to a state of well-being. Mental health includes our emotions, feelings of connections to others, our thoughts and feelings, and being able to manage life's highs and lows. And so I think many of us actually wrestle with this subject, and so it's so important that we talk about it this week.
And it's going to be a great discussion. We're going to learn lots this week. And I know for my mental health, when the sun shines, Bill, I'm much
Way up.
happier. I just want to
Way
say.
up.
Have you lost someone, though, that you love to a disease? Maybe a physical illness. Well, our guest today is author Stephanie Morales-Beaulieu. Her new book, Anything But Ordinary, is fantastic, and it spotlights the legacy of faith her father Jesse left, not only for his family, but scores of others when he passed away from ALS. Stephanie, welcome back to 700 Club Canada.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I loved your book. I read it. I read the pre-book before it even came out, and I'm just so excited that it's
Yeah.
launched now, this Anything But Ordinary. It's an incredible story of your dad's life, and he was
Yeah.
taken too soon by ALS, right? Yeah.
He was.
Why did you decide to write his story, Steph?
I think the primary reason I wanted to write this story is because God was so faithful through a season I did not think that I could survive. A few months before the diagnosis, I remember saying to my husband, "If anything ever happened to my dad, I don't think I would be okay." And we all have those things that we think, God, anything but that. And so just seeing God's faithfulness, not just through the illness and his death, but just through his life, made me just want to write this book. And I also wanted people to know that your life doesn't have to be perfect to have impact. My dad was very human. He was a very godly man, but he was still human. And so this book really looks at the human, just real kind of side of the story. And I also want people to know that there's really no brokenness, nothing too messy that God can't redeem. And this book just has proof of all of those things. So I really wanted to share this story with people.
Well, I love how raw and real it is. I mean, I was just
hmm
drawn in from the first chapter. Tell us a little story, a little bit of his story, and how coming to
Yeah.
Jesus actually radically changed his life and the trajectory of your family, right?
Yeah, it really did. So on February 5th, 1986, he was driving home from where he worked as a mechanic in Vancouver. And he was driving into Richmond and he said, God, I don't know if you know me, but you know my wife. My mom had gotten saved about 15 months earlier and just had a pretty radical transformation. And he thought she'd like taken drugs and was on some new high. And my mom just thought he would never, ever get saved and had prayed and prayed and believed and struggled. And so he's driving home, from work and he says, if you're real, or he says, I have a problem. I want to become a Christian today, but I can't get a hold of the pastor. I've been calling him. He's not there. So if you're real, put him in the office. I'm turning left on Albion now. And it was about 2 minutes from where he was. And so that day marked the beginning of his encounter with Jesus that really changed the trajectory of his life. And I mean, he just, from everything I have been told, because I was only 4 months at the time, he just had a 180-degree transformation. I mean, God just changed his desires. My mom said he thought it was going to be hard to not go to the pub after work with the guys, and it was going to be hard to change his lifestyle. And it was like sin just kind of like fell off of his life. And then God called him into ministry. So he went from being a mechanic to being a pastor. He had his own share of struggles with depression and burnout and all kinds of things along the way. But ultimately, God had just been faithful through the whole thing. So you can read more about that kind of coming to Jesus in the book.
Well, I just love that. And I love even your mom's story you share. I mean, they were both radically
hmm
changed by coming to Jesus,
Yep,
right? Like it
absolutely.
changed
Yep.
your family forever. And I know that
hmm
reading the book, it had encouraged so many people who think that
Mm,
maybe there's someone they love. Maybe it's their spouse, right?
yeah,
Maybe
yep,
it's their child to think God can go
yep,
get them. It's
yep.
so honest. I love it. Share two
Yeah.
things with us that you want readers to walk away after reading your book.
I think the number one thing is hope. The back of the book says there is hope, and I think that hope is in really high demand these days. As you were saying, it's, Mental Health Week, and there's so many people that struggle, with anxiety and depression and all sorts of things. And I think the number one thing is you feel alone in it. And so I hope people walk away with hope. If you start the book discouraged, I hope that you finish encouraged. If you start the book thinking, I'm the only person who has real problems, and I'm the only person who struggles, and I'm the only person who has a hard time, with this walk of faith, I hope you finish the book going, I am not alone. This is normal, and God is faithful in spite of it all. And the second thing I hope people come away with is just feeling a sense of practical help. One of my dad's friends who I interviewed in the book writing process said, I'm so glad you're writing this because we have so many teachers and not as many examples. And um, and people that have read the book have kind of said, oh, it's like I feel like I'm just walking beside him and I'm watching my friend's life and I'm learning what it looks like to follow Jesus, what it looks like to have faith in the middle of being human and struggling. So I hope people walk away with hope and just feeling helped.
Yeah. And tell us a little
Hmm.
bit, just quickly, about that very difficult moment when you got the phone call that your dad had been
Hmm.
diagnosed with ALS.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I just never in a million years expected that phone call. I didn't even know what ALS was. And sadly, now when I say ALS, people go, oh, that's a horrible disease. Like so many people now know somebody. And back then it was like, what is that? I don't even know. I knew what fatal meant when my dad told me that news. So I remember just shocked, sad, and I remember going down to my knees in my living room and just saying to God, which kind of surprised me, I said, thank you for what you did in his life in 1986. Because of that, we have hope for this journey. And so I knew that the fatal diagnosis wasn't the end. I knew that there was going to be hope beyond the grave. And I knew that God, was going to need to be faithful. And he was through that journey. But I remember just feeling gratitude for knowing how much God had already done and sort of being willing to trust that he was going to continue to do that for us.
Well, I just love that. And I do think this story of your dad's life, the way you share your journey as well, is just
Hmm.
this journey of grief and joy, this tension of
Hmm.
grief and joy, right? If you had to pick one word to
Hmm.
capture how God has used this journey of this tension of grief
Yeah.
and joy, what would it be and why?
I think I would say redemption. Um, I think sometimes in our love for befores and afters, sometimes we kind of are like, oh, once I was sad, now I'm, joyful, and we kind of erase the hard and the messy and the good. But I think redemption is God taking what was hard and what was sad and just using it for good. And I remember in that journey, um, thinking, God, I don't want the suffering and the pain to be wasted, and I'll trust you, but like, I don't want this to be for nothing. And so I've seen God take something that was so hard, something I didn't think that we would make it through, and not make it not sad, not make it not hard, but use it for good.
So
And so
good.
that's
Yeah.
encouraging.
Oh, that's so
Hmm.
good. And that's the truth of it. And I
Hmm.
strongly encourage people to get your book. It's
Yeah.
so inspiring. To learn more
Yeah.
about Stephanie or to order her book, there it is, Anything But
Hmm.
Ordinary. Go to 700club.ca. Thank you so
Hmm.
much, Stephanie, for writing it. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you so much for having me.